Hi guys, and welcome to another 7-minute lecture. Secularism is our topic today. I think it's a crucial concept to understand, especially given modern geopolitics. More specifically, I want us to narrow down on the two types of secularism that one can see practiced around the world. The two are what I personally like to call the American model and the Indian model. The USA and India are not just the two largest democracies in the world, they are also the largest secular powers in the world. And while both are multi ethnic and multiracial, the type of secularism we see in both countries, that's drastically different. So, what is secularism? It's simply the idea that the public sphere will not be influenced by religion. This is, of course, an ancient idea, but the modern word secular was coined by the British writer George Holyoake in 1851. Most of the people watching this video are probably from secular democracies because it's probably the most popular and internationally accepted model of governance in the world today. Even though there are explicitly religious nations, there are far more countries with some type of commitment to secularism. And even the really theocratic ones often have to make promises of becoming more secular in order to earn the goodwill of the international community. So, what are these two types of secularism that we see in the USA and in India? In the United States, secularism takes the form of separation of church and state, as in, secularism is envisioned as a concept where there's a clear dividing line between administration and religion. The Indian model of secularism is very different. In India, secularism is defined more along the lines of protecting minorities. So, the Indian constitution, for example, explicitly gives minority religions more privileges than the Hindu majority. So, for example, let's say you're a Christian and I'm a Hindu. If you start a college in India, the government cannot interfere with the running of that institution because you're a minority and that privilege will not apply to me. So it's a really weird case of the Indian constitution. It's a really weird exception of a country disprivileging the majority and extending special rights to minorities. Because in contrast, if we look at non-secular countries like the ones we see in the Middle East, aka West Asia, the constitutions and the legal frameworks we see in those countries specifically state that it's the majority religion, Islam, which is privileged, and members of the majority religion who legally enjoy more rights. Whereas in India, at least from a constitutional point of view, it's flipped, where members of the majority religion, Hinduism, are the ones who get the short end of the stick. Something like this would be impossible in the United States. The US Constitution would say, we don't care what your religion is. As far as the law is concerned, you are all Americans and you're all equal before the law, regardless of your religion. Because in this country, we separate church and state. We keep religion and state in two separate boxes. That's what the American legal system would say. Speaking of equality before the law, this problem runs deeper with the Indian model of secularism even more. India has no uniform civil code, and the argument is that this is done to protect minorities. So, a uniform civil code simply means that the same law applies for everybody. India doesn't have that. In India, laws apply to you differently based on religion, especially personal laws. So, if you look at marriage, divorce, adoption, inheritance, all the laws that make up family and domestic legal issues, all of that is different for different Indians based on their religion. If you're a Hindu, you follow a civil code, and if you're, let's say, a Muslim, you have a different thing called Muslim personal law, which applies. I don't see many discussions about secularism understanding or highlighting this difference, which is why I wanted to make this video, because I see many in the West denouncing the erosion of secularism in Asia without understanding that what's practiced as secularism here is very different. Similarly, I find many people in this part of the world trying to trash the philosophical idea of secularism itself because they are unaware that secular institutions and secular values in a country like the US has nothing to do with what goes on here as secularism. We can even see how this creates contradictory positions in the global political debate. If I was to speak at, let's say, a religious conference in New York and say, look, all Americans should be treated equally, regardless of their religion or ethnicity, I would get applauded as being very secular. But if I was to repeat the same thing in New Delhi, I would be denounced as the enemy of secularism and perhaps as even some kind of majoritarian fascist. Conversely, though, this also means that minorities in the East, Eastern countries like India, that the minorities can afford to be more visible and vibrant in their practices. So, for instance, in India, you will never have a debate over whether Muslim women can wear the hijab. It's just taken for granted that they can. You won't have ridiculous public debates about whether schoolgirls are a threat to national security because they're wearing hijabs. And that's the sort of final major distinction between the American and the Indian models of secularism. The USA has always been famous for the idea of a melting pot, where no matter where you come from, you can melt into the pot and emerge as an American who looks and dresses and thinks and talks like as an American would. And that's a good example of American secularism. On the other hand, on the streets of India, you can see people who are very clearly, distinctly Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Christian. You can see all of them interacting with each other and walking side by side. The whole sort of bar joke cliche of a Jew, a Catholic, a shaman, and whatever walk into a bar. You can literally see that in India, and you can see that religious diversity. And that's a great example of Indian secularism, since the minorities have all their identities protected. So tell me, what do you think the more beneficial or stable style of secularism is? Are you in favor of an American style where we clearly separate religion and law, melting everybody together to tailor like a secular society and identity? Or do you prefer an Indian model where secularism is used more as a shield to protect religious minorities than to treat everybody equally? Let me know in the comments. If you like content like this, please don't forget to share and subscribe. Thank you, take care, and I'll see you soon.